Hey everyone, so a lot of people watched the video I put out on Monday on trans people, a bit of a departure from my typical content, but I thought it would be a fun experiment to critique both extremes of a touchy topic. I was a little worried about getting attacked by the woke mob based on what I said about comedians and sports, and I did get a bit of that with varying degrees of legitimacy. But it was nothing compared to the avalanche of whiny incels sent over by Matt Walsh himself. They all had lots to say about how I'm a groomer and how Matt totally destroyed me. Of course, this is because Matt couldn't help but attempt to respond to my video, and what's this? He canceled me? Oh no, don't cancel me, Matt. What'll I do? Wait, what? Oh, nobody cares. So, what was this masterful analysis that so totally destroyed me, bro? Let's go through it top to bottom.
Let's go through this together.
Everybody seems to be furious about trans people. Half of us are furious that they exist, and the other half are furious about what the other half is saying. I would like to jump in and see if I can clear up some of the ways that people are talking past each other. Now, it's no secret that I'm a bit on the liberal side, but rest assured the left is not going to get away scot-free on this one. They're missing the mark on a few key points. But as tends to be the case, it's bigots on the right who are the main problem, so let's start there.
We're off to a rough start. Putting aside Dave's smug, know-it-all tone and demeanor, something that seems to be a matter of instinct for people like him, so I'm not going to hold it against him.
Smug, know-it-all tone, Matt? Pot, meet kettle.
The real problem is that in the very first sentence, he's already wildly and intentionally mischaracterizing his opponents. In 30 seconds, he gives us a straw man and an ad hominem.
A straw man and an ad hominem? Look out! The two favorite phrases of every internet narcissist incapable of actual discussion. No, Matt, what I said is neither of those things. It's called hyperbole. I know that's a big word for you. Here's the definition. An exaggerated statement or claim that is not meant to be taken literally. You're acting like I literally meant that 4 billion people are mad that trans people exist, and the other 4 billion people are mad at the first 4 billion people. Really? Not much of a scholar of language, I take it. It's just a fun way of saying a bunch of people and a bunch of people.
Which signals that he doesn't have much to offer beyond this point, because if he actually planned on making a compelling argument, he wouldn't come out of the gate breezily dismissing millions of people as bigots. Sorry, not millions, billions.
Sorry, which billions are we talking about? You're now blending the two halves statement and the bigot statement for some reason. I said it's bigots on the right who are the main problem. That's true. There are bigots on the right, and they are problematic. That is not equivalent to saying everyone on the right is a bigot. As is evidenced by the large numbers of conservatives who thanked me for my video, saying that they learned a lot, despite your minions mindlessly repeating your straw man. We're off to a really bad start here, Matt. You've demonstrated immediately that you can't understand simple sentences. Or maybe this is your tactic, misrepresent me to stir up hatred and release the mob? Yeah, that's it.
He says that the people on the other side are furious that trans people exist.
Yeah, you are. That's why you're denying their identity and have devoted your life to spreading bigotry. All of your content is like this. You make videos hating on feminist comedians, which really just means women, because you hate that women can be funny. You can't help but hate. Just saying you're not a bigot doesn't change the fact that you're a bigot. Sorry.
We're not furious that trans people exist, but rather we deny the underlying premise of gender ideology.
Right. To deny the identity of trans people, you call it an ideology to pretend that there's an institution to rage against.
Overall, it's a mess, and we're only 30 seconds in. Let's continue.
The primary issue is people who deny transgenderism. These are the people who spew the tired Fox News talking points. Liberals say there are 89 genders and anyone can identify as a hamster, that sort of thing. It's a deliberate caricature of reality peddled by all the angry conservative dudes popping up in my feed lately who claim that nobody can define a woman. Let's all take a moment to acknowledge the problems that go along with the ambiguity of language. Sex and gender are different words that refer to different things. If you did not know that, now you do.
So we have another common rhetorical tactic from the left, and honestly, I'm quite disappointed to hear common rhetorical tactics when I was promised an utter destruction of my worldview. And I was looking forward to it. Professor Dave says it's a tired Fox News talking point that there are a lot of genders. But that's not Fox's talking point, that's his talking point. This is indeed the official position of the gender ideologue.
Nope, nowhere in my video did I say anything about more than two genders. Sorry, Matt. For someone who whines about straw men, that's already two thus far on your end. Yes, it is indeed a Fox News talking point, which is just a way of saying the dumbest things that conservatives say, because Fox News is a primary outlet for conservative propaganda. Some activists have said things resembling that, and you run with it and accuse other people of saying it too, like you just did to me. But anyone who actually watched my video knows I didn't say that. Don't you guys hate it when liberals find the most batshit insane QAnon KKK weirdo raving about lizard people and pretend that he represents all of you? Then maybe stop doing that yourself. The issue isn't number of genders. You are denying that someone can have a gender that is different from their sex. That's all my video was about.
Sex refers to biology, while gender is a linguistic term that refers to words, but was co-opted by a pedophile sexologist named John Money and applied to people in a vague and ambiguous way. Dave never mentions that point. He doesn't seem to know where his own ideas came from, or else he doesn't want you to know.
No, I'd never heard of this person prior to what you just said, because I'm not peddling ideology, I'm just acknowledging that trans people exist and using biology to explain it.
From here, Professor Dave provides a basically correct definition of sex with a long digression into intersexuality.
A long digression. It was 8 seconds.
And then gets around to talking about gender. Let's listen to that.
Gender is a different phenomenon. It is still biological, but it is a neurochemical construct. This means that ultimately it is still genetic in basis, but it absolutely is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes. It is tremendously more complicated, and researchers are still working to understand the biological basis of gender identity. Human psychology is complex. People need to deal with that. Thoughts and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena. We all have a neurochemical profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity. The reason that we are just now becoming equipped to differentiate between the two phenomena is that in the vast majority of humans, somewhere between 99 and 99.9% of all people, gender identity aligns with biological sex.
So gender identity has a neurochemical basis because it's a feeling, and feelings can be traced back to brain activity. Okay, sure, I'll buy that.
Thank you. You are officially accepting the main point of my entire video. Anything else?
The question is whether those feelings reflect reality. That's the question. An anorexic person feels that she's overweight. The feeling is a biological phenomenon in the sense that it's happening in her brain in the same sense that a man feels like a woman. But we understand in her case that the feelings are disordered, incorrect, wrong, delusional, and so we work to treat her brain, her feelings, to more accurately align them with reality.
Matt, this is the best you can do? In the case of someone who is anorexic, there is a disconnect with something that is objectively measurable and quantifiable in the external world. If they feel like they weigh 300 pounds and they objectively weigh 100 pounds, that's not the same thing as gender identity, which occurs exclusively in the brain. Oh, what other brilliant analogies have your followers thrown at me? Can I identify as rich if I'm poor? No, your bank account is based in external reality. Can I identify as president if I'm not? No, people voting is based in external reality. Can I identify as Chinese if I'm white? No, your genome and birthplace exist in external reality. Getting the pattern? So I'm sorry, this whole bit is an enormous miss.
But let's keep listening anyway.
The unfortunate linguistic coincidence is that we use terms like man and woman, or male and female, in describing both of these phenomena. That is where the confusion arises, when people insist that one term must encapsulate both phenomena at once. So when someone asks, what is a woman, expecting to get a very simple answer that children can understand, they are sorely mistaken. The answer requires a discussion of genetics and neurochemistry.
Well, I'm sorry you find it offensive, Dave, but yes, I do deny the concept of gender as it was conceived by John Money. You accept that concept as gospel. You're offended that anybody disagrees with it.
Again with this guy. I don't know him or care. The concept of gender does not depend on what one guy said. You're like creationists who try to debunk evolution by defaming Darwin, as though modern evolutionary biology is just people reciting origin of species from memory. Either address what I'm saying without tethering it to some disingenuous talking point, or admit that you can't and have to poison the well instead.
Meanwhile, you say that the definition of the word woman is complicated, but please note that it's complicated is not a definition. So you still haven't defined it.
No, I did. I defined it in the context of sex, which is the chromosomal definition that you like, and then I defined it in the context of gender, which is anyone who identifies with a gender identity of female. This is associated specifically with brain development. You and all your willfully ignorant followers can pretend that there is no scientific basis for this, or you could just type some things into Google Scholar and check the literature for yourself. Here's one: Neurobiology of Gender Identity and Sexual Orientation. Let's browse through some other titles, shall we? Sexual Differentiation of the Human Brain, Relation to Gender Identity. Ooh, this one talks about the hypothalamic uncinate nucleus. You know about that, right, Matt? Oh, and this one is about the human infundibular nucleus. Brain feminization. I wonder what that means. And the papers just keep coming. If you disagree with the findings of these papers, I look forward to reading your peer-reviewed rebuttal overturning an entire subfield of neurobiology with your non-existent expertise. Let's reiterate, because this really is the main lie for you, and everyone who mindlessly repeats, "What is a woman?" condescendingly on a video they didn't watch which defined it. Earlier, you admitted that you're cool with sex and gender being different things, and you are aware that we use the words man and woman with reference to both terms, and I gave you both definitions in my original video and just now. You just didn't like what you heard and are refusing to interface with it, so you can placate all the people who were pestering you to respond to my video, even though you have nothing legitimate to say. Nearly every binary has been shown to actually be a spectrum, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes conservative people.
Wait, what? Nearly every binary is a spectrum? Like what?
Sexuality, undeniably so. And sorry, also gender. Do your dance of denial, nobody cares.
As for the claim that 10% of people are gay, where did you come up with that? Where'd you get that from? Well, I'll tell you where you got it from. You got that from Alfred Kinsey, who made that claim in his book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, which is the same book that contains a chart documenting the orgasms of infants. He arrives at his arguments and his figures about human sexuality by interviewing sex offenders and prison inmates and lying and pretending that he surveyed a cross-section of the population, but he didn't. So that's where you're getting your information, Professor.
No, but sure, whine about Kinsey, lie about where statistics come from, pretend that only one person has ever decided to ask this question or gather data about it. Anyone who says things that you don't like got their information from a pedophile, right? No, it is not. It is a biological construct. Society can't turn you trans any more than it can turn you gay. Gender is determined biologically.
His indictment of conservatives was complete without ever approaching the vicinity of any one of our actual arguments, and then he turns to criticize liberals to prove how fair and objective he is by slamming them for not being liberal enough.
This is astounding. It's the dumbest and most blatantly dishonest thing you said in the entire video. When you want to make fun of liberals, you would gladly agree that gender is not a social construct because you want to claim that trans people are just mentally ill and transness is made up by society. But then when I say it because I want to pick on them, all of a sudden you have to disagree and pull something out of your ass, like not liberal enough, because you don't want to address the biological basis of transness because you can't. What unbelievable hypocrisy. And why did you stop here? Of course, you can't show anything beyond this point in my video because it's all things your viewers would agree with. I specifically talk about how trans people can't change their sex. Can't show that, can you? You want your followers to continue to spew ignorant straw men about how liberals think men can have babies and other such tripe. If only you had shown them this bit of my video that none of them watched, And the parts about comedians and sports? No way, you've got to keep those viewers outrageously polarized and foaming at the mouth. How else are you going to get those views?
He also says that society can't turn you trans, totally ignoring the fact that in our society currently, and only in our society, only in the West, there has been a many-fold increase in trans identification. If that's not society turning people trans, what is it, Dave?
Well, Matt, see if you can wrap your brain around this concept. When a society is accepting of a particular identity, more people will feel free to publicly identify that way. You know, like how gay people just suddenly started popping up everywhere in the 70s and 80s and having their own places to gather out in public? Was society turning people gay, Matt? No, people just felt like there was finally a lower risk of getting lynched or even murdered just because of who they like to have sex with. I get the feeling you would have been the type to lynch some gay people back in the 50s, am I right? With trans people, it's no different. They have only become marginally accepted in the past decade or so that's the increase. And hey, here's a little good faith morsel I'll throw your way. I'm willing to acknowledge that some young people are probably trying on transness like a hat and proclaiming identification as trans when they really aren't. Who knows? And don't start throwing all this kids being mutilated stuff at me. I said absolutely nothing whatsoever in my video about children undergoing surgery. And quite honestly, don't really support it, at least not unless and until developmental psychologists can come up with a set of criteria to confidently diagnose transness based on a suite of neurological and behavioral markers.
If you say that there have always been this many trans people, but they were all in the closet, you'll then have to explain why there was never, ever, at any point, ever, a mass epidemic of people committing suicide because they were not affirmed in their gender identity.
There wasn't? How do you know that? People have always committed suicide all through history. How do you know which of them were trans? Only the ones who left notes that said, "I'm killing myself because society won't accept trans people until the 21st century"? Who are you to determine what percentage of people who have committed suicide over the past several thousand years were trans? Think before you speak.
Indeed, why is the suicide epidemic happening now when trans people are so affirmed?
I think it might be people like you, Matt.
Gender ideology is a modern Western social construct that didn't exist until it was invented by psychoanalytical quacks and then parroted mindlessly by people like you.
No, gender ideology is a dog whistle that people like you use to propagandize others against human rights.
The evidence is entirely on my side, in fact, and not at all on your side, because on this topic you are wrong about nearly everything, and your underlying claims are so nonsensical and incoherent that you can't begin to explain them or defend them, and that's why you don't even try.
Well, I just did. Anyway, that's all you had to say, and all of it was stupid. This could have been done face-to-face like grown-ups, as I requested by email the day after I posted my video, naively pointing out what I thought to be common ground. But you wanted to do this childish tit-for-tat, and so this is what you get. So, Matt, I'm sorry, but you're canceled. Wow, that is fun. Before wrapping up, while I have everyone here, I do want to pivot and address some of the criticisms I got from the other side. First, with the gender is not a social construct bit, people have brought up things like gender being assigned to nouns in certain languages, and how our ability to interface with certain concepts is shaped and contextualized by language, psychosocial dynamics, the distinction between gender and gender identity, and other such nuance. That's all fine, and I'm sure there's plenty more I and we can all learn about gender. I was simply focusing on debunking the claim that trans people are just mentally ill, rather than that being trans is an identity with basis in biology. Second, with the sports thing, I am aware of HRT. I just think that a manipulation of hormone levels is not the only issue. Puberty is responsible for alterations in anatomy that are not reversed by any kind of therapy. The frame of the body itself is dramatically different between the sexes. I do not believe the science is settled here. Yes, it's true that height and weight and musculature vary within the sexes to provide advantages, but most sports don't take that into account because it would be impractical to divide everyone up endlessly by every category imaginable. It is not my intention to infringe on the dignity of any athlete or make sweeping conclusions about how the sports world should move forward. I also understand that if trans men were to compete with women, this would also be unfair due to having more testosterone. There are lots of problems, and I don't want to diminish the issue by simply saying that I don't care about sports. I hope this will be resolved in the near future in a way that is satisfactory for as many people as possible. And finally, with the comedy, I know that with Chappelle, it all started with the proclamation of being Team TERF, and I acknowledge that this is problematic language. I just maintain that people like Dave don't know about the difference between sex and gender, and accidentally defend the immutability of sex as though they are interchangeable. That's the main reason I made that video, to educate people about the difference. I genuinely do not find him or other comics to be hateful. If other people have reached a different conclusion, that is their business, and everyone is free to express their opinion by boycotting any comic. Anyway, at this point, the response has become longer than the original video, but that's what happens when you're dealing with ignorance, as I've learned from tackling so many varieties of it. If you made it all the way through, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.